Also, speaking of swap outs, there was news last night that Spirax, I'm not sure how to say his name, the mid laner from FlyQuest Academy, is going to be coming into the main roster for Vicla, which is not a surprise given that Vicla's performance has been so incredibly poor. I guess they don't want to sub out Spica as well, because those two have been the primary, I would say, points of failure so far on FlyQuest. And maybe it'll rejuvenate the team, at least in terms of their morale. But I think this was a necessary shift for FlyQuest. I'm just shocked that Vicla could go from nearly making Worlds, nearly knocking out DRX, who eventually won Worlds during the qualification, winning LCK Rookie of the Year, and now be this terrible in North America while still playing the game a lot and maintaining his number one position in the challenger queue. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like this.
The main thing is, I have an angle on this because I did a TikTok on this topic the other day, because I think it's always a mad underrated aspect. There's another reason, in my opinion, why if you bring Koreans, you do bring two. And obviously they did in this case, but I think it sometimes doesn't help as well, right? Another thing about when you bring Koreans to the West is, another reason they degrade isn't just solo queues worse. It's that when they see they have teammates that just don't play the game, you're sitting there grinding after your scrim blocks, and then you look over and he's watching his new anime, he's talking to his girlfriend on Discord, he's playing some fucking PvE game. Eventually you're going to get dispirited. Eventually you're going to go, why am I putting in mad hours when they're just practicing whatever? So I have to say, this is a common trend. Sadly, a lot of Koreans either don't even arrive as good, or they just degrade over time. They just go off like fucking milk left out in the sun. It's ridiculous. And this guy, it's really sad in this case, because if they're doing well in scrims, there's no way he was playing like this. There's just no way. He's just inexplicably bad in LCS, and he is bad. He just can never. He never,
very bad.
After whenever he went off in the middle of spring, he never turned up again, mate. The nosedive just continued.
It's just very weird, because it's not like this guy hasn't had stage games. He's had high pressure matches in Korea in which he performed. It is completely baffling why he would regress to this form when we 100% know that he's grinding it out in solo queue right now. And as you say, Thorin, we know that the scrim results are very good. It is definitely one of the weirdest phenomenons I've ever seen, and there must be a huge mental angle to this, because that's the only thing that actually makes sense. There's no reason for him to be performing this badly, given the history of what's happened.
And by the way, this is where fans are the shittest people in the whole ecosystem, because the way they treat people the second that you're down, right? So even though Papa Smithy has never been anything but cool to fans, shows, keeping them involved in what's going on, giving his reasoning when other orgs don't, by the way, as to why he does stuff, right? So when he built 100 Thieves from a meme into a team that actually was going to Worlds and was winning championships and was in 3 straight, you'd think, right, we can't talk shit on Papa Smithy. Oh no, now they've retconned it, Monte. I saw loads of this in Reddit threads. The retcon is, cause FlyQuest failed, he never actually did anything. His version of 100 Thieves is Rioma and those players like that. And then all he did was see that Golden Guardians had those 3 players, and all he did was just sign them and put them in his team, and then they just had the success. So basically, I noticed they forget to mention Abidag in there, but apparently he's just a total fraud. He's now been exposed. As usual, everyone who ever loses was always a fraud. By the way, the best example ever is Perks. I'm not joking. They don't say now he's bad, Monty, and he isn't even bad now. He's just below par. They say he was always a fraud, and this just exposed him. It's bro, you got to listen. When you reach your 15th birthday and they drop, you talk a bit deeper, you'll start to realize some things about life, because it can't work that way, you cretin. What happens is you have a long career, and over time you have ups and downs, and later in your career you're not as good as earlier. Papa Smithy did an amazing job. I mean, why do you think he got the FlyQuest gig? How do you think he got convinced them to sign these big name Koreans and put in this team and get Impact and put it all together and speak listen, just because it didn't work, this in the off season looked like fabulous roster construction.
Also, Papa Smithy has been very public about saying in success, so he's not blaming anybody now, but in the original success at the start of the split, he said that Nick Fan, who is the GM of FlyQuest, was the one who put this roster together, not him, and that the talks about the roster were already ongoing by the time he was hired. Okay? So he was trying to give the GM the credit for creating this roster in the first place. Now, maybe that hasn't aged the best at the current time, but also who could have known that this roster that started so well, the skill vampires were going to double down on this entire roster? And he made a good move. Everybody saw that Ayla and Winsome were doing terribly within this team, and he went and got the premier North American support, which is Vulcan. Because he can't have more imports into his roster. And that was the best available player, the best available move they could make. And nobody thought they would be doing this badly coming into this season with Vulcan. Most people had them winning the league, okay, because they fixed their main problem. So I don't know what you want. Sometimes teams don't work. Nobody thought this was a bad roster move. Nobody thought this team was going to be bad. Even them, because they had all of the scrim results, all the practice results that they were seeing coming into this season, which were overwhelmingly positive, like crazy positive. And yeah, scrims don't always translate into stage performance. Scrim bucks are worthless, but you can't think it's going to go bad when you're winning huge numbers of your scrims. So, what else can you do? It's a bummer when these things don't work out.
Mate. Even when they say it's not like it's worthless in the sense that it doesn't count for anything in LCS, but it does indicate something. Like, spoiler, the 10th best team has never actually just won 90% of scrims. That's never happened ever in any fucking league. Like, that's why the Vitality one is significant, because it shows that the players cannot be bad. If even at the end, when they were shit in LEC, they were still beating G2 and Fnatic most of the time. That means they were cracked out. It means something went wrong with coaching on stage, drafting, performance, pressure, how people communicated. That's where it has value. Obviously, in the game, you don't get a trophy for being the best fucking scrim team. We get that.
Yeah. And to your point about Abadage, too, signing Abadage was the key piece of moving 100 Thieves into winning a title. Without Abadage, they don't really accomplish these goals. That was absolutely hugely important. Did it last very long? No, it didn't. Partially because 100 Thieves demolished the roster after Papa Smithy left, but they did make 3 finals in a row. So I do think it's pretty ridiculous to criticize him for what is clearly not a GMing problem. He literally picked up
Reaper, bro, like one of the best coaches ever in LCS. Like, and he got, like you said, he got Vulcan to join a team that looked like maybe it didn't work. He convinced this guy to join the team. Like, I think in general he's done a very good job. He's just had these few regular season games that gone bad. Okay.
Here's what happened. Like, this is actually what happened if you look at when it happened at the time. And you tell me if this is bad GMing. You signed a top 3 hyper carry AD carry within the LCK last year, who is by far the best player on Live Sandbox. You signed the rising star LCK Rookie of the Year, who almost made Worlds as a rookie. You signed literally the World Championship winning coach, who must have been doing something because he squeezed every last ounce of potential out of a DRX roster that had no business winning the World Championship. All right? And then he makes moves. So Spica was also very important. Spica was one of the hottest free agents because of basically, being the best player on a garbage TSM roster for a significant amount of the time. You get Impact, literally the most reliable player, and who plays weak side, so you can strong side into these very powerful imports that you have. And then, you have some visa problems with your support. Then it never comes together, unfortunately. And you have 2 kind of bad supports on your team. So you know what? You go and get Vulcan, one of the greatest North American supports, if not the greatest North American support, and to fix that problem. How is this bad GMing? Sometimes shit just doesn't work. Sometimes it doesn't work. And
it's like what happens. This is the same thing happens to in-game leaders in Counter-Strike Monte, right? Because people think they did it all, they were the leader. It's like, at the end of the day, like, all I can do is put you in a good position with good teammates and then tell you what to do. If at the end of the day you don't in Counter-Strike click heads or in League of Legends do the right moves, that's on the player. They're not actually fucking bots doing what the GM or the coach or the leader says. Like, they have their own minds and their own fucking willpower. So the problem is, you can it's the same thing with Fnatic last year. That's why I never got the angle that the Dardo guy was a moron. Yeah, he's had some bad lineups. Dude, that lineup he put together last year looked fire on paper. I thought they were going to win the LEC. The one where it's like, he had Razork off an MVP split, Humanoids won championships and been a shot caller. He kept the bot lane of Hylissang and Upset, which used to be the best in the West. And then he brought in Wonder for sort of a bounce back. And that looked fucking sick. It doesn't matter that Neville was actually that good. It's sort of underwhelmed a bit. He still did a great job GMing it. You can't know until they play if they're actually good or not.
Yeah, and there's so many other outside factors, and there was really no criticism about any of the among experts about any of the moves FlyQuest was making, right? And they're even coming into this split because other teams were playing against them in practice. Everybody was really high on FlyQuest, including the other teams and players within the LCS guys. So what do you want? What do you want in this situation? Shit sucks. You know, all the moves make sense logically. They spent the money. They did everything they could to create a good roster. The synergy just isn't there. It's the same shit that happened with Misfits back in the day when they tried to make that super team. It looked so good, guys. It looked so good. Why wouldn't you get Gorilla as an import player? That's an insane pickup for a European team. And yet, just never worked out. Look at what's happening with Vitality right now. It's not that the individual pieces of that roster are bad. Far from it.
Indeed. See more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.